Order. 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 Senator Mason.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, let me let you in on a secret. I made a mistake earlier today. I understand why Senator Lazarus moved the motion he did today. I don't support it, but I understand it. I even understand why the Australian Greens supported Senator Lazarus' motion. I understand it. I don't support it. But like Senator Abetz, I cannot believe that the Australian Labor Party, Australia's oldest political party, the alternative government, is also supporting it. I've had some big debates in this place against Senator Cameron and Senator Wong over the years, but that's politics. As Senator Abetz has pointed out, this is principle. And I have even a greater authority than Odgers, Senator Abetz. I've been here long enough to remember Senator Robert Ray in full flight. And the thing that annoyed Senator Ray more than anything else was when the privileges of the Senate were taken for granted. He always said, you do it to us, we'll do it to you. You set a bad precedent, we'll set a bad precedent. Don't do it. The Australian Labor Party, Mr. President, should know much better than this. I've had debates in this place ranging over all sorts of issues over many years. As Senator Brander said earlier today, I've never come across a motion quite like this, that traverses and indeed trashes Senate principle. When you have the idea that a parliament of this country could sit in judgment of another parliament, not a government, but another parliament of this country, you are setting a precedent that hell knows where it will go. And I have never, in all the time, Senator Cameron, ever come across this from the Australian Labor Party. For all the arguments we've had over the years, and there have been some few, I accept, and I haven't won all of them, but this is an issue of principle. And I'm really surprised that people like Senator Ludwig, Senator Moore, Senator Claire Moore and others would come at this. Because this lets open the door in the future. I may not be around, as it were, to, how do I put this, secure action against the Australian Labor Party or others in the future. But if I was so minded, I'd have a very good precedent now, Mr. President. This should never happen. And I'm just surprised that the Australian Labor Party, the alternative government, has let this happen. It's cynical. It's totally and utterly cynical, Mr. President. The idea that the Senate, its powers and procedures should be used to settle a personal, an economic and fiscal score is absolutely outrageous. Now, I don't know about Mr. Palmer's dispute with Mr. Newman. I don't. I have no idea about it. My friend Senator O'Sullivan has a much better idea. But the idea of hauling the upper house of the Australian Parliament in a direction where it should not go in pursuit of personal and fiscal and economic satisfaction is absolutely outrageous. I have never seen this in my entire time in the Australian Parliament. The idea that the Palmer United Party would do this, I understand. But the idea that the Australian Labor Party would adopt this stance is virtually unbelievable. And let me just go where Senator Abetz started to go before. If you have a look at the actual motion itself, it has all the cogency of a dartboard. It's this sort of miscellany of misgivings. Now, I'm not a very good lawyer, and I'm certainly not up to the arcane Senate procedure, as you well know, Mr. President, but I will do my best. I'll do my best. The idea in the motion that there will be a select committee to inquire into the amount of Commonwealth funds allocated or paid to Queensland, with particular reference to the purposes for which the funds were appropriated by the Parliament. Well, Mr. President, you know what? How those funds are appropriated is a matter for who? The Commonwealth Parliament. And we were elected last year to do that. And it's all, not only is it audited, Senator O'Sullivan, have a look at the budget papers. you might get some understanding about what's going on in 1A from the budget papers. 101. Secondly, performance measures in relation to Commonwealth funds paid to the state of Queensland. There is there too. There's performance measures as well. The ultimate performance measure, as Senator McGrath said before, of course, is an election. But there are, in fact, Department of Finance performance measures. And indeed, they differ. They differ depending upon what the money's granted for, whether it's GST, whether it's for the national road system, whether it's for school fees or school funding or hospitals. It all varies. You go over the page, Part 4, the proportion of the Queensland state budget derived from Commonwealth funds. You can find that out from the budget papers, again. So we're supposed to have an inquiry into something that's on the public record. This goes on and on. And I note Senator Brandis, the Attorney-General, and Senator Abetz touched on this before, spoke about Part B, the administration of the Queensland courts and judicial system insofar as it relates to cross-vesting arrangements. Yes, that probably is incompetent, but more than that, it's not the subject of proper attention by the Australian Senate. That's really the point. So again, there's this miscellany of misgivings. It's a fig leaf for an attack on the Queensland Premier and the Queensland Government. Part C, Mr President, approval processes for the development, and this is important, Mr President, approval processes for the development of projects for the export of resources or services insofar as they are administered by the Commonwealth or under a bilateral agreement with the Commonwealth. So what? We have a bit of an examination, do we, into the private arrangements, the private interests of a Queensland individual through the course of a Senate inquiry under Part C, because that's what could happen. Again, I say to the Australian Labor Party, is that really what you want? I can't believe that you do. I understand the Palmer United Party would want that, and the Greens, well, who cares? But you're the alternative government. You're setting the precedent here. I can't believe you would want the Senate specifically to be looking at that matter. And it goes on. Part F. The extent to which Queensland state government policies and practices are consistent with Australia's obligations under international human rights instruments, with particular reference to the administration of prisons and detention without trial. Now, again, I'm not the lawyer that Senator Brandis is or Senator Abetz, but even I know that a Senate inquiry is not the place for that. The extent to which the Queensland government is applying the law, is complying with the law, is a matter for who? For the courts, isn't it? Isn't it? So why are we having an inquiry into this? If there's a complaint, surely it's a matter for the Australian judicial system, not a matter for another parliament to sit in judgment of another parliament, for the federal parliament to sit in judgment of the state parliament, Senator Lazarus. I understand your concerns, but this is not the right way to go about it, Senator. This is bringing in all these extraneous matters where there are other forms of accountability, Mr President, many other forms of accountability, sir, and what we're going to do is set an awful precedent for the future, whether it's the Department of Finance, whether it's matters for the Australian court system, whether it's a matter solely for the Queensland Parliament. These are not matters principally or even for review by the Australian Senate at all. And finally, I suppose the big doozy, Part G, Mr President. Any other matter the committee considers relevant. Now, again, I'm not a good lawyer at all, but one of the very few things I remember from law school, Mr President, was I think they used to call it, Senator Abetz, the general warrant. Those evil kings in medieval Britain, Mr President, when they didn't know what they were looking for, they had what was called a general warrant. It was what today might be called drift net fishing. Drift net fishing. So you just go for everything if you can't find it. And it's an investigation, well, it's an investigation into everything but nothing in particular. That's what that means. That's what Part G means. Again, I'm not, I don't claim to be I've never claimed to be a very good lawyer, but I know, Senator Lazarus, that umbrella is far too broad, far too inconsistent to possibly have standing in the Australian Senate. It is ridiculous. The only thing, if we're frank about this, the only thing binding, the only sentiment binding this entire motion together, this miscellany of misgivings, Mr President, is nothing to do with Queensland government administration. It's not to do with the operation of the courts or human rights. It's not even to do with our fiscal accountability. They are just the fig leaves for an attack on the Premier and the Queensland State Government. That, in fact, is what this is all about. And so we end up here today debating this motion in the Australian Senate, and on we will go, talking about the Australian Senate reviewing Queensland Government courts, administration and financial capacity. Now, just take a second, Senator Lazarus, to think about the precedent you are setting. You can see what will happen constitutionally. This will mean that from now on and forever, you will have a situation where parliaments, one democratic elected parliament in this country, will sit in judgment of another. And perhaps, Senator Lazarus, a state or territory parliament sitting in judgment of us. And I don't think that's a good idea, Mr President. This idea that somehow parliaments of this country, federal or state or Commonwealth, sit in judgment of each other. As my friend Senator McGrath said, the people who stand in judgment of parliaments, in fact, are the people, not other parliaments. Mr President, in the end, the cynicism of this entire motion is easy to see. It's political, it's personal, it relates to business interests. The election date in Queensland, well, the reporting date, I note, is 31 March 2015. Is that right, Senator O'Sullivan? That happens to be very likely just after the Queensland state election. The entire, I mightn't be that smart, but I picked this up. The entire Queensland government will be under the microscope of the Australian Senate right through the election campaign, right through the end of this year and right through to March of next year. That's, in fact, the aim. This isn't about Queensland government administration. This is about getting the LNP electorally, and in particular, the Premier, Mr Newman. It's about that. It is so cynical. And even the membership of the committee. Now, I can't believe the membership of the committee. The committee consists of 5 senators, one to be nominated by the Leader of the Government in the Senate, 20% to be nominated by Senator Abetz as Leader of the Government in the Senate, and he represents the government of this country. Is that appropriate? Again, I'm looking at the Australian Labor Party. Think of the precedent that is being set. Think of the precedent that's being set. And then, and I'm disappointed, I'm disappointed, Senator Lazarus, that under subsection 6, that the committee appoint as chair the Leader of the Palmer United Party in the Senate and elect as deputy chair a member elected by the committee. So, the deputy chair on those numbers will not be from the coalition. No, they'll be from the Australian Labor Party or worse, from the Greens. It's an absolute fiasco. Again, it breeds what? Cynicism. And again, I urge all the Palmer United Party, and particularly the Australian Labor Party, think of the precedent this sets. Exactly. Be careful what you wish for. You may get the numbers, you may get this up, but just remember, some senators will be around a long time. This is not the precedent you want to set. If we're really concerned about the expenditure of Commonwealth monies by Queensland governments, if we're really concerned about Queensland government administration, let's just assume we are for a second. If we really are, why don't we, in fact, as Senator Abetz said, why don't we look at the conduct of the Queensland government since the 21st of March 2009, i.e. the election of the Bligh government, the election of Ms Anna Bligh in her own right. Then you might sort of argue, well, we're looking at more broadly at Queensland government administration. But in fact, it's not about that. It's not about that at all, is it? No, it's not. It's deliberately about an attack on the Premier of Queensland and the Liberal National Party government. The disgrace of this, Mr President, the disgrace of this is not, in fact, the Palmer United Party is doing this because I expected it. In fact, my colleagues all expected it. Where I made a grievous error, and I admit it, I'll let you in on the secret, is that I thought the Australian Labor Party would be far too responsible to enter into this sort of arrangement. That's what really disappoints me. They are so much better than that. The alternative government, the oldest political party in this country, a party with a proud tradition and proud leaders, and yet they've embarked on this road. And I know none of them are proud of it, because look at them. They're hardly going to be jumping out of their pants when this is passed, Mr President. This is a disgrace. Now, in the future, Mr President, in the future, over the next few years, as this precedent gestates through the Parliament, I think we could find all sorts of precedents from state, territory, Commonwealth parliaments. If this becomes part of the matter of government in Australia, if this becomes normal government practice in Australia, the nation will suffer. Forget about Mr Newman. Forget about Mr Newman for a second, as much as he's a great Premier. The precedent it sets means that every Premier, every state government, every territory government and every federal government could be in line for examination by another parliament. They could all be in the frame, Mr President, every last one of them. And Senator Wong, I'm surprised, because for all our arguments over the years, I admit we've had a few, where you have never ever taken a stand of principle like this. What Senator Brandis said earlier on, that he has never come across this in his time in the Senate, that is true. And I've been here 15 years now, and I have never ever seen anything like this. Why? Not because even so much it's this instance, Senator Wong. It's the precedent. It's the precedent that it sets. And, Mr President, in the future, the democracy of our country, every government and every parliament will be traduced by this. The powers and the privileges of parliaments will be compromised by the powers and the privilege of other parliaments. And that was never part of the constitutional compact of this country. The federation of this country was never founded on this sort of constitutional trashing. It was never founded on this constitutional trashing.
Senator Sullivan and Senator Wong. Sorry, Senator Mason. Senator Sullivan, Senator Wong. Senator Mason, you have the call.
The federation of our country was never founded on these sort of constitutional arrangements. There's nowhere in the constitutional debates that you'll find any reference to a state or a territory government, being held to account by a Commonwealth government. Nowhere will that be found. And I just want to put this on the record, that the Labor Party will live to regret this. Senator Robert Ray, for all his faults, was right about one thing in politics: what goes around comes around. What's going to happen in the end is other places, other parliaments, at other parts. It's true, Senator Cameron. Other parliaments at other times and in other places will adopt this precedent, and when they do, our democracy will be weaker. And it will have started right here today. And that's what gets me. I understand why the Palmer United Party did this, and I understand why the Greens did, but for the Australian Labor Party, Australia's oldest political party, to fall for this constitutional travesty is an absolute disgrace. In the federation debates that your party participated in, never ever foresaw this. Senator Wong, you never foresaw this.
Order on my left.
You will wear this Australian Labor Party because it's an important matter of constitutional principle. You have given up the principle of comity of parliaments. You've given that up.
and you've given up
Order on my
a
left.
constitutional prerogative and a constitutional assumption. You have given that up, and you gave it up for what? A cheap motion, a cheap and pathetic motion on the Senate on a Tuesday afternoon. You're prepared to mortgage principle for that. It is an absolute disgrace, Mr. President, and God help the Labor Party in the future.
Order.